This is episode 150. Everybody, thank you for being here. Joining me is Chris Scott, and his video is cutting out a little bit, but now it's coming back into awesomeness.
Are we here?
Yeah, you look good. Well, you got injured, my man, on your shoulder.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's something I'm always wary of. TMS, or the mind-body syndrome, or is it tension myositis? Tension. There's a fancy name for it that I don't totally comprehend. Do you know what it is?
Yeah, well, at first it was tension myositis syndrome. Then it was tension myoneural syndrome.
Okay.
And then it was mind-body syndrome, and now it's psychophysiological disorder.
All right.
PPD.
Right. So that's actually knowledge of that. And John Sarno, who we've talked about before, anyone who wants to look him up, Sarno, has helped a lot of people with chronic pain, chronic back pain, joint pain, etc. I've realized that I've had structural injuries in the past that healed, and then the pain continued for some time. Once I read his work, the pain stopped. So I'm not like a success story in the truest sense where I was searching for answers. It wasn't like my alcohol recovery. I'm not a chronic pain type of person, but everyone has aches and pains. And I think everyone has TMS to some degree. What I did this past week was I was grappling with a guy, and I pushed off the floor like that while getting him off of me. And when I did that, I pushed, but I didn't go anywhere. I just heard pop, pop, pop right in my shoulder. So that made me nervous, but there wasn't a huge amount of pain when it happened. It was just, I heard it, but I didn't feel much. And then a little bit of pain going like that. So I consulted a good buddy of mine who's a physical therapist in training, and he scared me a bit and said, you may have torn your rotator cuff and you go get an MRI, you might need surgery. After he told me that, really good guy, well-intentioned, and he, maybe caution's in order whenever you do something. But after he said that, it hurt a lot for several hours. Then I went to a chiropractor who said, all right, I'm going to pop it back in. So I had my elbow like this for anyone who's watching the YouTube. He was behind me and he went like that. I didn't feel it pop back in. So I was equally skeptical of his thing or diagnose or whatever it is. And however, I started feeling immensely better almost instantly. Like 80% of the pain went away, even though I didn't feel anything structural happen. So I know my mind is playing games. There must be like a TMS element to actual injuries. Something happened. Most likely I strained my rotator cuff, or maybe my labrum, or one of the rotator cuff muscles. Maybe a ligament is a little bit pulled, but it's fine. I have full range of motion, and just been putting some CBD balm on it, which I guess Dr. Sarno would caution against doing any such thing. But I did an hour of yoga yesterday and it was fine.
Your rotator cuff is not pulled then, or not.
It's not
torn. Not torn.
It's not torn. I did an hour of yoga. The hardest part was taking off my shirt when it got hot. I got stuck. It was like I was about to submit myself with my own shirt, because when I take off my shirt, I go like that, and I pull. I don't know if that's the correct way to take off a shirt, but then I try to do it with the other side, and I realize I take for granted how I usually do very tiny, mundane things. So when you have like a minor injury, it makes you realize like, wow, I shouldn't take my joints for granted. I do things like walk or put on my socks in the morning or take my shirt off in yoga class. But no, it's getting better and it's fine. I just ordered some of your dad's self-heal cream with full spectrum CBD and DMSO and other stuff. I think it'll get better this week. I'll just kind of take it easy. And incidentally, I'm also starting on a paleo phase, so that should keep inflammation low. I was feeling a little bit puffy after Thanksgiving. And so some of that was the consequence of eating desserts that I don't usually eat. And it's funny how eating desserts on holidays can transfer into the week after the holiday is over. You're more likely to get that pizza or ravioli or other thing that you wouldn't normally eat because you've started that imperceptible blood sugar chain of events. So for the past several days, I've been eating extremely clean, basically just meat, vegetables, no sugar, no grains, and just sweet potatoes for my carbs. And I feel good. And the shoulder is already feeling a bit better. But just one of those things makes you grateful to have a functioning body. I did the same thing to my other shoulder doing weighted dips a few years ago. And that was actually when I discovered Dr. Sono's work. I had a good friend who was healed of his intense and serious back pain. He couldn't get out of his car. And then I had this shoulder thing, and I was like, yeah, well, I must have pulled something in my shoulder because I couldn't do bench press for like 6 months. And I just avoided it. And then I went into the bathroom. I looked in the mirror and I said, stop being a bunch of obscenities. And then I went back out and I did bench press and the pain was gone. So there is a medical layer. I think sometimes people might have a pure case of TMS, but the interesting phenomenon for me is when there is an actual structural problem that then turns into a case of TMS and just lasts for way too long. Because as we know, if you break your femur, it should heal within a matter of months, or even, is it 6 weeks or 6 months? I can't recall.
6 weeks, I think.
6 weeks, it should repair. Not to say that you wouldn't feel weird for a while, but you shouldn't have pain if you break your femur, as far as I know, and I'm not a medical expert, but there's no reason to have pain like 70 years later in that same spot, unless the brain has decided that it's for some reason convenient to have pain there. And people get mad when I talk about this because it's all in your head. It sounds offensive, but there seems to be something to it. And also, Dr. Sono is always careful to clarify that it's not that you are looking for a reason to be weak or have pity. That's not it at all. It's real pain. It's intense, real physical burning or searing pain. It just happens to be that the source of it is not totally, at least structural. So yeah, that's my thing. And I have some things that I wanted to share real quick with my new, burst of energy for diet supplementation. I've been taking more supplements in the last several months than I usually do. Taking Dragon Herbs supplements, been taking 3 grams of glycine before bed, sleeping really well. And I got on a little kick with mushrooms. Here I have my Fresh Cap Thrive 6 mushrooms. They changed this actually. It used to come in a little bag, a paper bag, and I would get mad because the mushroom powder it gets caught up in the air and it falls on your counter. I have a white counter, so it's not convenient. And they really did a good job with this. It's a tiny little scoop in here. And you just take 1 scoop a day, and it has, let's see, maitake, chaga, turkey tail, reishi, cordyceps, and lion's mane. And I feel mentally sharper when I take it. And then I have here my Goji Berries, which I will be making your Goji milk recipe that you shared with me before we talked. And this is the Heaven Mountain Goji Berries. This is Dragon Herbs. I love their stuff. And I compared this to the Whole Foods brand, which is good. They seems to be a good company. But the problem is these are so much more moist, which is great. These are so dry that I actually get a stomach ache if I'm just munching on them. So I kind of avoid them. And so far, no stomach ache from this. But I'll be making your milk, applying that self-heal cream to my shoulder, doing time-restricted eating. So eating in an 8-hour window, at least until Christmas Eve, and trying to get up early with the help of glycine. Because for me, getting up early is all about going to bed early. And I always feel invigorated when I set up a new routine for like the next X amount of weeks. In this case, it's 2.5 weeks. I'll figure out what to do after Christmas Eve. There's a new year coming. But for now, I have like a pretty clear vision of what I want to do on a day-to-day basis and things I want to improve. And, especially accounting for my shoulder here, I'm always wary of an injury or a minor thing throwing me off track and then using that as an excuse to binge on Netflix or stop going to MMA or not do yoga. I don't let that happen. Obviously, if I got hit by a Mack truck, I'd need to not go to MMA. But I'm very protective of my routines and my schedules, and I find that at least every 6 weeks, coming up with a new plan, writing it down, incorporating new supplements, diet changes, um, teas, mushrooms, etc. But also, things like the miracle morning concept. Like, what am I going to do when I get up earlier in the morning? There's no point in getting up earlier in the morning if you just turn on Netflix. So there are things that I want to get done, become more productive, enjoy the sunshine, go earthing. There's a beach nearby, and it's not the best beach ever. It's Tybee. And it's about 40 minutes from my house, but it's the only place I can go earthing that doesn't have. I'm a little concerned about the golf course pesticides. I live near a bunch of golf courses, and I can go earthing at night, but I don't know what they put on that course. But I haven't been to that beach because it's not dog friendly. So I have 2 dogs. So I finally figured out that I can take the dogs somewhere once a week and have this routine where after MMA, I go walk on the beach for an hour barefoot, rain or shine, because who cares? It doesn't need to be warm for me to get the benefits of earthing. And I don't have to feel guilty about the dogs being home in their crates.
I was thinking about the topic of pets and animal therapy last night when Ashley and I were hanging out with our birdie. And we actually took the bird to this place called Point Loma Seafoods, which has really awesome seafood. And it's all to go these days. So, there's an outdoor sitting area, but we got it to go. And then we went over, and it's like right by the bay that connects to the Pacific Ocean at a beautiful place called Shelter Island. So we took the bird and our food, and we found this cool little area that was sunny, away from the shade and the cold wind where we previously were. And we had this bay view and all these yachts and big fishing boats, and you could see downtown in the background. And we just had like a little outdoor picnic. The bird, I had a hood on, and Papaya the birdie was on my hood, and passerbys that were walking along there, a lot of them would look over and they'd be like, is that one of the birds around here looking for food that landed on his head and now they're feeding it?
Right.
A lot of people, you could tell from their body language, like, whoa.
So your bird is okay off leash?
Yeah, well, her wings are clipped, so she can't fly away.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I don't think they make bird leashes, but
They do actually.
Do they really?
They make bird leashes. Actually, my daughter Willow suggested that I get one. I was like, it's safer just to have her wings clipped, because that way she can be in the house, and we put her on the habitat so she can go in her habitat, out of it, on it, all over, and she's not confined. But also, your story reminded me of, I was probably right about your age with my first shoulder injury, and it was the same type of injury. I did it. I was doing wide grip pull-ups, and this, by the way, is probably only 4 or 6 weeks after I ended my addiction. So this is like, I was like, okay, I'm going to start working out again, and did some wide grip pull-ups and strained myself and stopped. Then with that same strained shoulder, I went surfing the very next day, I think it was, even though it hurt even more. And then as soon as I ducked over my board under the first wave, it was actually this shoulder back then, I was like, oh, and I felt this do something. And I came in, and ever since then, I had my first shoulder injury. It was a torn rotator cuff, partially torn. And that did not get better. It should have got better. It got better the first time. And then basically, as soon as it got better, a couple of months later, I was doing an incline dumbbell press. And then I hurt it again. But now it was my rotator cuff and my anterior deltoid, is it? Is that the front anterior? Yeah. So it was, and also a little bit of my pec minor. So thus, I had a journey of about 3 years of mostly on chronic pain, going from shoulder to neck to shoulder to neck, going away over here, and then coming here for a few years after years and years of not having pain. Just so many weird things. It's like there's a lot of thought I've put into this. And I think what you were saying earlier about it being a combination of an injury and TMS, I think that's why it was so difficult for me, because I was like, I had a feeling that there was some structural stuff too, and the mental stuff and the fear around it. And so I think that's what I think more commonly than not, it's probably a combination. And that's why they changed the name to PPD. So it's psychophysiological. It's just basically an interplay of how physiological things mixed with the way we think about it can create different results than if we were to think about it another way. So when I injured my shoulder, all I heard from everyone was, oh, once you have a shoulder injury, it never gets fully better for life. Or, oh, once you get a shoulder injury, they just keep coming back. It never fully repairs. Oh, that's going to take at least this many months. Whether it was a massage therapist or whether it was a physical therapist or anybody. And so it was very like, wow, these people are. And so I was feeding my brain, feeding my mind with all this fear around it. So I would hear the fear and I would let it get to me, and I would obsess and fret over the pain. When can I work out again? When can I surf again? How long am I going to be in pain? The pain drove me to obsessively searching for ways to get out of pain. It was all consuming. It was kind of like addiction, except instead of compulsively drinking or compulsively using drugs, I was obsessively and compulsively researching and trying out alternative and even traditional pain relief strategies. This was for years. I think that was almost harder to recover from than addiction in some ways, just because the traditional methods weren't getting my pain better. It just wasn't helping. And a lot of the alternative ones weren't either. It was only when I came upon literally the wackiest sounding to most people idea, but it made perfect sense to me when I read that same book that you read, Healing Back Pain. I was not one of the lucky ones that got better from reading the book. I was one of the ones that needed to work with a pain therapist for a while. It was like 6 months. I needed to go to a doctor, to Dr. Schechter, a few hours north of me, and I needed to have him do a 45-minute consultation and assessment and lay me down on the mat. And he was like, yeah, you're a tension-generating person. Back then I was like a super duper overachiever and was always like, and I didn't know how to relax very much. I didn't know how to like just relax and be an achiever. You can do both. You can, relaxing, happily achieving, or you can just, I'll only be happy once I get all this stuff done and then I can be a success. So he said it was personality based for the most part. And at that point, he's like, there's nothing wrong with your shoulder or neck. He did a test. There was MRIs, and he's like, it's just, you develop a lot of tension on the daily. And he's like, you can't probably get a totally 180 on your personality, and who would want to? But he taught me ways that I could learn to tone it down. And as you've known, just since you've known me for the past, 4 years or whatever it's been, when I was probably 36, 37 back then, even then I was still a lot more tension generating. Now I'm starting to really learn how to go with the flow and, have goals and be focused on things, but really fall in love with the process rather than be only tied to the end result. Like, I'm in love with the process on a day-to-day basis because the way I've designed my life, it's fun to go through each day.
Yeah, you've mellowed out for sure. And now you have no pain in your shoulder, right? I mean, is it something that comes back every now and then, or is it something that you fixed?
Yeah, honestly, the main pain went away for many, many years. But when I moved to Hawaii, when I was engaged with someone I knew I shouldn't have been with in the first place, I just didn't think I could do any better. And I think she thought the same thing. We were bad for each other, but both of us didn't want to be alone. It was kind of an addiction to a person for both of us. But I developed pain in my left shoulder just from like waking up one morning after going to sleep. So then I started to go see a physical therapist there, and I was like, what the heck? And I realized this is probably just TMS too. I don't think I slept on it wrong. So since I had that mindset, it did. That pain did go away, and it got better. But it came back on this shoulder lots of times, just here, there, a few days, maybe a day, half day, and it would go away. But now that I've been just taking all these crazy, like I'm taking way more supplements now too. Yesterday, in fact, I was like, man, I can't believe how many supplements I take compared to before. But I take less synthetic and semi-synthetic supplements than ever before. Most of the things I'm swallowing are whole foods. They're animal organs, or they're superfood whole food powders, or they're Chinese tonic herbs. So these are all 100% foods that are 100% bioavailable, as long as my digestive enzymes and system is doing it right. But yeah, I'm also sleeping with a pillow in between my legs. Now, I don't know if it's just coincidence or not, but since I've been doing that, I haven't even had so much as tight trapezoids, kind of kinked neck or anything. I've been also taking 3 capsules of Chinese licorice root as well, from dragon herbs, of course. And because when I researched that, when I read the book that you're reading, Ancient Wisdom of the Chinese Tonic Herbs, it was saying how that can really relieve tension up in the shoulders. And it's like a muscle relaxant. So I've been taking 3 capsules of that daily. And so since maybe it's just there's placebo, who knows? But yeah, it feels great to not have
I'll take it.
any shoulder issue or anything. My thing now is I've been getting, like I'll be really energized on some days, and then maybe 1 or 2, even 3 days of the week, I'm like, oh, I don't have near as much energy. And it's kind of like, because on the days that I do go full speed all day, I go hard, like podcasting, blogging, coaching, emailing. I mean, you're doing all the same stuff plus a bunch of other stuff, and then shopping, cooking, cleaning, getting ready for Christmas. It just, but I think the herbs and the other, especially the grass-fed beef liver and some of the tonic herbs, deer placenta, etc. I feel like my adaptive energy is really, really good. It's not near as high as I want it to be, but my overall adaptive energy kicks ass. And
I think cutting carbs is also helpful. Once you adapt to that, there's an interesting thing that happens. The first time I did this paleo reset, I always, for some reason, incorporate so it's not just no grains. It's also 8 to 9 hour eating window at most. So if I eat my first meal at noon, I'm not eating after 8 p.m. or 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And also, I tend to keep my carbs until after lunch, at least. So I'm not waking up and eating a bunch of carbs most of the time. That the bite of goji berries I had was pretty rare. I mean, it's about 1 p.m. here. But I actually haven't eaten anything today. I don't usually start my day with even goji berries, even though that's natural sugar, because I notice that the longer I wait to start any kind of blood sugar fluctuation, the more stable energy I have. So my cheat meal after a really long, hard 3-hour MMA workout is the Chipotle that's down the road. It's the only fast food I can digest. I've eaten some fast food years ago. I haven't had anything in a while, but I remember having excuse me, head of.
he's like, did someone say Chipotle?
Concerned. I had, I think, Bojangles or something like 3 years ago. I spent the rest of my day in bed. Like that's how sensitive my system is to eating like fried chicken and God knows what else from fast food places. But Chipotle, I usually do like triple meat, double guac, double veggies. And then for a while I was adding rice and beans. And there's nothing wrong with rice and beans per se, but heavy on the carbs. And I would have this strong urge to take a nap whenever I put the rice and beans in there. So last week with this new paleo reset, took out the rice, took out the beans. So it's just the meat, veggies, and avocado and guac. And no crash at all, just smooth energy. And I actually had a day where I had 0 carbs and I felt fine, which is weird because the first time I did this paleo reset, it was really hard. Like it seemed like an act of willpower. The only thing I could compare it to was the alcohol cravings in early recovery before I figured out which supplements could help me out. And I think something happens long-term with progressive diet experiments where, and I haven't been in like pure ketosis. I mean, maybe I have, I kind of doubt it, but maybe if you go into ketosis once, that's the hardest time. And I've heard from friends who have done the keto diet that though they've gone in and out of it, they're like, the first time was horrible for them. They got the keto flu and everything. But now, because they got through that, they can at will go back into keto anytime, and the body knows what's up. It knows what's going on. So I'm not going strictly into keto, but I am going much lower carb than before. And so now my body's kind of relieved. I was relieved to not have the rice and beans. So there's an interesting thing, possibly also mind-body related, that goes on with diet. But I want to relate this to addiction also, because I think a lot of people might be interested to hear, how does this relate to addiction? And it's kind of counterintuitive when we're talking about TMS, something that, or anything mind-body, it seems to go against us being the supplement guys or the biochemical repair guys, until you grasp that the hierarchy of recovery is bio, psycho, social, spiritual. So there's more than just the biochemical pillar. There's the psychological pillar. And I guess the TMS would really exist in between those biochemical and psychological pillars. It's like the feedback loop doesn't just go from the biochemistry determining how you're thinking. It can also go your thoughts, the other way around, can help to determine how your biochemistry is working. And that's how Tony Robbins seems to work miracles with people, because he understands how to tweak people's, not just their thoughts in the short term, but their deepest beliefs and convictions and desires somehow really quickly. And I would bet if you looked at some of the people who he's helped, he's somehow reset some neural pathways. He's probably changed levels of neurotransmitters. So there's some very complex, quantum level wiring that goes on in our bodies, between our brains and our bodies, which makes it such that they can't be totally separated. You have to take care of the biochemistry. That's a given. But you also have to make sure you're taking care of your thoughts, your beliefs, and things like pain or even alcohol cravings. If you hear someone who's been going to AA for 30 years and they still have intense physical alcohol cravings, I always think, well, first, maybe they never repaired nutrient deficiencies, or maybe they must have neurotransmission that's too low. But then I think that sounds to me like a manifestation of TMS as well. So yes, they could probably get relief if they took supplements, because you're giving yourself the raw materials to fix the problem. But what if on some quantum level you have to give yourself permission to fix the problem? By thinking, by hosting beliefs and convictions that it can be fixed, that it's not a permanent affliction, that your identity is not a suffering permanent addict or alcoholic. So those things then go hand in hand. And then you have the bio, that would really be psycho-spiritual, both of those pillars involved in that. But I've had some people ask me, out of confusion, say, well, if addiction's primarily a biochemical problem, then why should it matter what we think? And I think it's a really good question. But I think the answer to it is that we are simultaneously biochemical, psychological, social, and spiritual creatures. And we have to look after all of those things.
Electrical.
And that's why I like the term missing links. Yeah, because they're missing links that can be in any or multiple pillars at the same time, because they cross the boundaries.
And we're 99.99% energy.
Correct.
And the thoughts that we think actually help to our brain chemistry. So when we think bad thoughts, then all of a sudden our brain chemistry goes deficient, even worse than it was. And it all plays with each other. Have you heard of Tony Robbins' priming exercise?
Yeah, I think so. I think I saw a video on it a while ago.
The second time I went to Unleash the Power Within, that's when he started teaching that stuff to us. That's when he had developed it. And so obviously he has a cold plunge tank at his place in Boca Raton, Florida. But for everyone else, you end your morning shower with freezing cold water, and then you go to where you can sit up in a chair, and you do something where it's a combination of closing your eyes, two different breathing techniques, and also you're visualizing certain different things. And so the breathing's like, and you do that, I think, 30 times, and you do 2 or 3 sets of it while you're closing your eyes. Then all of a sudden, after the cold shower and doing that rapid breathing method, then you're super oxygenated. The cold shower benefits are unique. And all of a sudden, you start to visualize. I think it was something like 2 things you're grateful for, 2 things that you want to make happen that day or that week, and then something like where you actually feel your body strengthening and optimizing and resolving any issues in your body, and then healing anything with your family. It's like, I forget exactly, but it's very powerful. There was a Facebook group, this is many years ago now, where for the people that went to that particular UPW, there was like 10,000 people there. It was in Los Angeles, 10,000 people. And so the people that were on that Facebook page that did that 30-day challenge, oh my gosh, they were just posting the most remarkable results in their life. And that's my trigger, is when I go in the shower in the morning, or maybe it's even in the afternoon sometimes, but usually in the morning. As soon as that cold water comes on, that's my habit trigger. The freezing water hits me. I'm like, woo, that feels bad, but good at the same time. I come out, and then as soon as I get that cold shock, instantly I'm in my routine of like, making the bed and coming over to my planner, and like that just starts off like it's a domino effect on crushing it throughout the day. On the days that I do not get into the shower, I'm just like some of those days I was telling you about where I'm just tired. One of the main reasons I don't get out of that overall kind of tiredness is because I don't get into the shower that day. And if I do, it usually helps quite a bit. I had to jump in the shower before this session. I was like, I want to be sharp for this. And before the cold shower, I wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned in my 5 Epiphany Friday email, which I've started doing again. I just share some things that I've been pondering that have helped me in the last week and what I've been up to based on Tim Ferriss's 5 Bullet Friday, which I love those emails. I shared that I've been going back in the cold plunge. And it's not technically a cold plunge pool. It's an unheated pool outside of my gym that no one goes in except for me and my friends. And I had a course member who posts a lot of awesome, helpful stuff, send an article or post an article about how alcohol inhibits norepinephrine, which is an important neurotransmitter for mental clarity, acuity, cognition. And it's also, incidentally, something that is released or increased when you do cryotherapy or jump in a cold plunge pool or take a cold shower. And so I found that to be interesting, that I feel instantly more clear-headed and capable of getting my mind around the rest of the day, week, month, even year sometimes when I'm sitting in 50-degree water. It's like everything becomes clear. That might be a function in part of norepinephrine. I mean, could be a one-dimensional way of looking. I'm sure there's a cascade of things going on, reduced inflammation, and maybe cytokines aren't reaching my brain, and all sorts of good stuff is happening. But I found that phenomenon to be interesting because I was not actually aware that alcohol would have that effect on norepinephrine. It's not surprising. I mean, we know that alcohol indirectly through inflammatory cytokines and other means impact your levels of serotonin, dopamine, et cetera. But norepinephrine in particular, it's why I used to be so confused. It took me a long time to figure out why did it take me so long to figure out how to get out of my trap. I was just drinking for years, day in and day out. And I would say, I'm going to do something about it, but never get my mind around it. I think it's in part due to that lack of norepinephrine, where I never had a big enough burst of energy to be proactive enough to fix the problem. So the cycle would continue. So I'm not saying that you can jumpstart your process guaranteed by jumping in cold water, but it might be something worth thinking about.
I'm saying someone can jumpstart. I'm saying that jump in a cold shower, you'll get shit done.
I actually did have a client in a different country, in a Middle Eastern country, where alcohol is not legal, but not it was frowned upon for sure. Lost all of his friends and fiance, and his parents had basically disowned him. And he quit drinking with a combination of basic supplements that his friend had to smuggle into his country and cold showers and push-ups in an apartment that he was about to be evicted from. And he got off of a liter of hard alcohol a day, or maybe it was a fifth, but it was a lot. He got off of that and got a job just in time to not lose his apartment. Pretty crazy, but cold showers were instrumental for him. And I don't lie about the fact I don't love cold showers. I can get in. When I get in the shower, it needs to be warm unless I just got out of a sauna or a steam room. I don't like starting my day with, it's like a cold plunge is fine because you jump in and you accept it and you adapt. And I use it as an opportunity to reframe. Like, this isn't that bad. And then it gets much better. For some reason, the cold shower, it feels like I'm just being tortured over and over again. Like, just there's enough air in between the droplets that it's like continually jumping into it. The part where you're jumping into the cold pool for like 10 minutes straight. I don't like it very much unless I'm already very hot. But to each their own. Kudos to whoever can do that. I prefer the cold plunge, but it is also a good exercise in reframing, because I've noticed, I did a little experiment in that cold plunge pool. So I'm going to jump in and I'm going to think to myself that this is really cold. It's really bad for me. I might get hypothermia. Oh, none of this is true, but I'm like thinking these thoughts or trying to think them genuinely for a minute. And that, my grandmother always said, like, you're going to catch a cold. So I jump in and it was very bad. I did not like it at all. And then the next time I jumped in, I thought, this is good for me. I'm reducing inflammation. I'm increasing norepinephrine. Any injuries I have are going to be healed. I'm increasing my mental toughness and self-discipline. I'm controlling my reality. And all of this is good. I jumped in and it actually felt good. The shock. And it's a great way to change your state, which is how I think Tony Robbins would talk about it. State changing, having many coping mechanisms for changing your state that are healthy and not inherently addictive, at least for whatever a person's range of addictive tendencies are. Probably want to keep your coping mechanisms out of that. But that's also highly subjective. I've had some clients who can, every once in a blue moon, use marijuana to change their state, or magic mushrooms or whatever. There's a lot out there. And other people, if it took someone 2 years to quit smoking marijuana and now they're addicted to alcohol, probably don't want to use marijuana as a buffer against relapse or as a state changing mechanism. So everyone's different.
Yeah, drugs and alcohol are the ultimate state changers. Unfortunately, the more you use them as a resource in that arena, especially prolonged, the more they become an exhausted resource. Then all of a sudden you've got a problem that was much worse than why the person started drinking or using drugs or both to deal with it. And then I think the prevention in America is just awful. I mean, I swear, if somebody just sat me down when I was, probably old enough to be able to understand it well, and just said, listen, and gave me the real talk about drugs. If you do these every single day, this is what's going to happen. Like, I feel like if I would have been really educated on that, I feel like when I got that first Valium prescription, because I was afraid of pills when I was a marijuana smoker, and then even a binge drinker, and then even a daily physiologically and psychologically dependent boozer. I just had no love for pills back then, really. I was just like, oh, I'm afraid of these. I'm afraid of these. Then my doctor prescribed me Valium when I went in there for saying I was depressed, I was anxious. And that's why I told him I was an alcoholic and I was drinking because of depression and anxiety. And he gave me Valium. And then all of a sudden my fear of pills went way down. And then eventually I was just like, well, who even cares about alcohol anymore? Because benzos and opioids would give me way better benefits without the hangovers, without the blackouts, without getting arrested and all that. But all my life searching for state changers, first I found riding waves is the ultimate state changer. Surfing, bodyboarding, body surfing. There was nothing better than that. I would just come out of those wave riding sessions and I'd feel euphoric. Sometimes for the rest of the day, if I had a good enough surf session, sometimes I'd be on cloud nine for days or a week afterwards. But the only problem with that is that good waves come and go. I have a theory about this, Chris. I'm not sure if you know this, but there's a high percentage of surfers have problems with drugs or alcohol or both. And so my theory is this, because this happened big time with a lot of the friends I grew up around here with. So think about this. You start surfing and then you become so into wave riding with your friends and catching great waves. You're exercising, you're out in nature, in the ocean. A lot of times here you're in the sunshine. And it's just this plethora of positive things happening to your brain and body to make you just feel great. Then, I mean, these are like peak highs. Like I'm talking about no drugs and no behaviors I've ever taken part in have ever made me feel as high as getting a 10-foot drop into the tube and it's just barreling over you and you're just like hoping to God you don't fall and get hit on the reef and die. I've been in those situations, not in a long time, but I've been in those situations many times and almost did die twice surfing. But so when the waves suck, sometimes for weeks at a time, we call them flat spells. Then if your brain is used to going to get this many chemicals going on in there, just big surges of dopamine and adrenaline and noradrenaline and GABA and serotonin and oxytocin, and then all of a sudden you don't have that. Well, you know what we did? We looked for other avenues to where we could get that type of state change. Nothing we found did it to that degree other than things like downhill skateboarding, risking our lives going 30 miles an hour, sometimes 35 miles an hour, a lot of times 20 to 25, but very dangerous. I fractured my scaphoid at once doing it, which is when I retired that career. But so, and then drugs and alcohol, mushrooms, go camping. Like we were always looking for those wild state changes, preferably something really intense. Because back then we were all adrenaline junkies.
So
we were always looking highs. We wanted to get highs. We wanted to smoke weed. We wanted to surf. We wanted to go play concerts in front of people. We wanted to shroom. And like, I think it's natural for humans to want to have those experiences and feel good. But I think what the main thing is we're not proper. Most of us aren't properly educated when we're younger about the potential negative consequences of using alcohol or drugs consistently. The DARE program was a joke. I'm not sure what they have nowadays, but it's apparent to me that unless you get some good schooling from your parents or other family members or someone, then I don't know if we leave it up to the system, because that's what they're doing too now. Even in politics, they're looking at putting over $100 billion, I think it was. Maybe it was different than that, but a lot of money into prevention. They're looking into that because I feel like we're going towards an addiction apocalypse. I'm telling you, that dream I had last night, I feel like the longer this pandemic and lockdown goes on, the worse, the more long range, the negative consequences, the unplanned negative consequences are going to go on for. And also, I think with technology advancing so fastly, I think that there's going to be many more new things that are going to be even more addicting than perhaps even drugs and alcohol. Once we start hooking up to these virtual reality things where maybe you can even feel, hear, and smell, and think we're just going towards more addictive things, but also they're going to come out with more awesome addiction therapies and stuff.
Right. Well, I think back to I think that's a really interesting theory about why surfers might have higher rates of addiction. It's the contrast between the natural healthy high that you're supposed to have, that we've evolved to appreciate, and maybe the the fluorescent lights, or you're sitting under carcinogenic lights in an office or whatever, wherever you work, or maybe you have a job that's unfulfilling. Like real life is pretty hard and and bleak sometimes. At least it can be hard to view the things that you have to do when you're young as stepping stones to something better. And there are people that never get past the stepping stones, and that's tough. And it's obviously been a strange economic universe for the last, well, I guess you could say 10 or 15 years, but even beyond that, depending on where you are in the system. So I could see that the contrast between those highs that we can really appreciate, that are good for us, that we should have. Like, I don't even know how to surf, but when I'm body surfing 3-foot waves, and you're like, these waves suck, I'm having the time of my life. I feel amazing. Maybe it's in part because I know what's going on with my biochemistry when I'm in the ocean with all those negative ions, and I'm grounding, I'm earthing on the beach, and I'm soaking up as much vitamin D as I can get, and there's fresh air, and it's awesome. I'm doing deep nasal breaths, and the water's cold. All of that's a recipe for just total optimization right there. So I can see how you'd get that plus something that you're skilled in doing. You get into a flow state with it. And then when you have to go work at the deli or whatever it is that you do, it's like, oh, this really sucks. So you get high or you're really low, and you get being really high or really low. As far as the pandemic and lockdowns causing an addiction apocalypse, I mean, I agree. I saw recently that there was a headline that there were more opiate deaths, overdose deaths, than I think it was a record. And I don't know if that was for the month or for the year. I'll have to check that. But that kind of surprised me because I didn't think that the situation was getting much better. But for some reason, I just assumed that lots of people were hearing about Kratom and about the various strategies that you talk about on your website. But it's a giant country. And to reach however many millions of people are struggling would be very tough. I mean, that's our goal. But I think it's going to be an uphill battle. And even with $100 billion or whatever in prevention, I'm not particularly confident that the government will allocate that into strategies that actually work. So, I'm always a bit skeptical. I hope that you're right, and that in the next 5 to 10 years, we see healing the addicted brain as becoming the number one modality, or at least lens through which we view addiction recovery, rather than seeing it as primarily an emotional or a spiritual problem. Not that the emotional or spiritual should be neglected, but that they're just, people need to see this as a, at least in part, biochemical disorder involving the brain, real organs, real systems, real neurotransmitters, real hormones at work. And I think if that's the focus, then we have a shot at preventing this, or at least helping the people who are caught up in this addiction apocalypse, as you say. But the numbers are really scary. And a lot of people have been drinking at home. As I mentioned in my email to my list on Friday, it was forecast, the alcohol industry had forecast a double-digit decline in sales. And they're now project for the year 2020. They're now projecting only an 8% decline in sales. Of course, that could still mean that people are drinking more. It probably does, because it's cheaper to drink a bunch of hard seltzers in your basement than it is to go drink craft beers at a brewery and expensive wines when you're out at dinner and all that. People are opting for cheaper liquor and probably drinking more in total. So a lot of people are drinking at home, and that's also something. When I was growing up, I always heard if you drink. Now, I guess not when I was growing up. I guess maybe when I was in college. People would say, it's fine to drink or even binge when you're out with people, but if you start drinking at home, that's when you know you have a problem. And that's just, I guess, a little rule of thumb thing that I decided didn't apply to me when I started drinking at home. But that's something that a lot of people are probably currently rationalizing their way out of. Like, well, of course I'm going to drink at home. Everyone's at home. Like, I'm just not going to drink, and an interesting tidbit here is that in a self-reported survey, they found, whoever did the survey, I can't recall, found that a quarter of people have changed their drinking habits drastically since the pandemic, since the lockdowns began. 14% of people immediately started drinking more. So that's interesting. So once the first lockdowns were announced, 14% of people immediately started drinking their faces off. Then 11% of people immediately started drinking less. So you have to think those are the people who are the social drinkers. The drinking establishments are closed. So why would they drink? I'm not going to drink at home. But then the other people, and I would argue that 14% is a deflated number, because you have no incentive to lie about being the type of person who is drinking less. But there is always an incentive to lie about a vice that you're partaking in. So I would argue that 14% is more like 30. It's like a giant, because we see other surveys where it shows over half of adults,
50%.
50 or 60. I mean, over 50% of adults are day drinking at home. So there's something going on. And a lot of people, unfortunately, are going to find that alcohol is an inherently addictive substance. There are people who could probably drink as much as they want and somehow not get addicted to it. Their biochemistry is just not attuned to it. And good for them. But I just have a feeling that the natural selection is not done with humankind as far as alcohol is concerned. So we see and this is just the genetic part. Obviously you can probably pummel yourself into alcohol addiction through repeated drinking episodes, unless you're in the very lucky minority of people that just can't seem to get addicted regardless. Some people also, as we know, seem to get addicted almost immediately once they start drinking. And you and I probably fell closer into that category. But I think, if you look at the breakdown of alcohol addiction by region and by ethnicity, there's an interesting correlation where the places where alcohol was available for a long time, like the Mediterranean region, people have been drinking forms of wine for thousands of years. You have lower rates of addiction. And that's because alcohol wiped out the people with the genes that would have made them more predisposed to addiction longer ago. So you have rates that are more like 5% or between 5 and 10 at the very most. Then when you go up to places like Poland, where, you think of Poland and Russia as having had vodka forever, they didn't. It's been a couple hundred years, maybe, that they've been drinking alcohol regularly. And so those people have rates of addiction that are sometimes in the 20 or 30%. And this is pre-lockdown. So that's something to consider, is that, here in America, we're a melting pot of all sorts of different ethnicities and cultures. And unfortunately, the natural selection process by which alcohol wipes out those people who are genetically weak as far as, and I would be in this category if I hadn't quit, genetically weak when it comes to processing alcohol or not developing an addiction to it, that's not done. And so these lockdowns are going to speed up that process.
Wow. I had read the study where you were talking about the increase. Some people immediately quit drinking less, and some people immediately quit drinking more. But that on the genetics right there, and the older countries versus us, we're a melting pot of all of us are immigrants, most basically, and that is some trippy stuff. Also, there was a podcast episode that just came out either yesterday or this morning, the Michaela Peterson podcast. It's on this specific episode, it's her and her father, Dr. Jordan Peterson, both interviewing Wim Hof. And it's talking about some of the things we've been talking about in this episode. It's like this Jordan Peterson comes from the background of psychology and neuroscience, sociology, religion, mythology, philosophy, politics. And then Wim Hof's just total, like, ancient ancestral medicine with the breathing exercises and the cold therapy. And so that blend, that podcast, with those differing minds on different kind of topics coming together, that's what I want to see more with addiction, is more of that type of merging together. So I'm thinking like Dr. Nora Volkow, that's the president or the head of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, seeing her like talking with someone that's like a master of nutrition for addiction, like Christina Veselak, or Julia Ross. Conversations like that, where there's this crossing over of traditional and alternative and blending something more holistic together out of it.
Yeah, I think innovation in anything tends to come when you have two perspectives that are outsider perspectives to each other fusing together, and then you get a new way to look at a problem.